Hello, good morning. Welcome to this week's Learn with Lorna, episode number 197, where we'll be looking at the fascinating subject of the County Clerk's papers. My name is Lorna Steele-McGinn. I'm the Community Engagement Officer with the Highland Archive Service, which has 4 archive centres in the Highlands of Scotland, in Inverness, Fort William, Portree and Wick. This series is brought to you by Highland at no cost to the viewer. Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we really appreciate that. And I know I always say it, but I always mean it. So thank you very much for those of you who have donated to enable us to keep doing things like this. This week is pre-recorded as I'm currently speaking to the Highland Senior Citizens Network, who meet at exactly the same time as Learn with Lorna. So I couldn't possibly ask them to reschedule, so this one is pre-recorded. And this week I'm looking at a fascinating series of records that sit within our local government collections and that sit within the papers of each county, the papers of the County Clerk's Department. There's a fantastic film on the National Library of Scotland's Moving Image, in their Moving Image collection, sitting on their website, which explains more about the role of the County Clerk. And I shared this a couple of days ago on our Facebook page. So it's a 19-minute film. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, do go and look back on our Facebook page and find that, because it is really, it's a very sweet little film that explains the role. Now, the County Clerk, in that film, it describes the role as affecting the life of every man, woman and child in a county at some time or another. It goes on to say that the County Clerk is concerned with every single thing that happens in the running of a county. The film on the NLS website actually focuses on the county, or focuses on Stirling, and it was shot in 1950. But it explains very well the challenges facing the role of any county clerk, a role that had to consider all the aspects of life across a county. And the counties will usually include very diverse areas, so rural areas, urban landscapes, and also a wide range of people and industries. And the county clerk needed to be a font of knowledge on such a wide variety of subjects and legislation. He, and I think it was almost always he, was the one who was responsible for ensuring that the county council's decisions were put into action, and also for ensuring that the council's actions were law-abiding and in line with current legislation in every field. So it's a very, very important role, a pivotal role in the running of the county council, in the enacting of the county council's decisions, and in that role of making sure that those decisions are law-abiding and that the actions of the county councils were law-abiding. The county clerk would often be the port of call for various departments and services run by the council if they needed information on the other activities of the council, on funding, on legislation. It was a very, very joined-up job. The county clerk would have oversight of things as diverse as infrastructure, education, industry, housing, so many different aspects. All of the council's functions and all of the council's service delivery. I was speaking to my colleague Fiona, who you will have heard me mention before, has been in the role here for over 30 years as a senior archivist, now a senior archivist. And I said to her, how would you describe the role of the county clerk? And she said, they're the absolute pivotal centre point of all local authority life. So there you go. It's a very, very important role. It's a role which would also have been one of a network of county clerks across the country, all liaising with each other and gaining advice and knowledge and input from each other, but also all liaising with government. So it's a very powerful role and a very important role. We hold records for the County Clerk's departments of all of our historic counties, Inverness, Ross and Cromarty, Sutherland, Nairnshire and Caithness. And indeed, the County Council minutes sit underneath the County Clerk's department section of those records. But I'm going to be focusing on records from Caithness and for Inverness, which at the time, pre-1975, when the counties came to an end, Inverness-shire before 1975 included Skye, Harris, North and South Uist, Barra and other parts of the Hebrides. Not Lewis. Lewis sat under Ross and Cromarty. And the reason I'm going to focus predominantly just on Inverness-shire and on Caithness records is that the Nucleus team have found some great Caithness examples for me to share with you. And also, the other reason is that Inverness-shire is unusual in the sheer number of bundles of correspondence that it contains. I could have done several episodes on this alone, and by the time I had finished compiling my notes, I decided that I was indeed going to do that. And also the other reason I'm focusing on these two particular counties today is that they're very different types of county. Caithness is a contained county with a large sea coast and with a border with one other county, a border with Sutherland. Whereas Inverness-shire is very large, it's sprawling, it covers a very disparate range of communities and populations. So let's have a look at some of the things that are covered within the County Clerk's papers. What sort of thing is the County Clerk concerned with? Now, hopefully, from that overview, you'll have got the feeling that the County Clerk is concerned with everything happening in the county. So I'm going to start by looking at some documents relating to infrastructure. These are the sorts of things that we expect local government to be dealing with. Roads, bridges, things like that. There are dozens of items within the Inverness County Clerk's correspondence that deal with roads construction, with damages, with improvements across the length and breadth of that county. And a county which, as I've already said, was very large, very diverse, with a population that faced totally different challenges, much like the Highland Council has to deal with now, those very different challenges that are faced from Skye to Inverness to Caithness, that range of experiences. And I found some really interesting documents within the Inverness County Clerk's correspondence that illustrated this. Like this one, written by the ratepayers of North Uist. They wrote to the District Committee on the 13th of April 1914, and the letter found its way on to the County Clerk for consideration. And this is what it said. You'll have to forgive me, I'm reading it off paper as I don't have a second screen to record this. To the District Committee of North Uist. We, the undersigned ratepayers in the island of North Uist, beg to urge the District Committee to exert itself to bring about a remedy to obviate conditions which within the last few years have been causing considerable alarm, inconvenience, and in some cases, loss to the public, namely the increasing motor car traffic on the roads, which are altogether unsuitable for such traffic, as may be seen from the figures appended, which are measurements taken at various points of the public road. It will be seen that at several places it is possible only for one vehicle to pass at a time. These points are given as not being the only ones needing to be widened, but in order to give a general idea of the state of the public road as a whole. We further beg to suggest a remedy in two practical ways. One, that motor cars be strictly excluded from the North Uist roads until those roads are able to provide ample space for motor car traffic. Two, that the roads be widened without delay in all parts where that is needful. The present state of things has become intolerable, so that the solution of the problem must be speedily arrived at. The people of North Uist will no longer allow their lives and property to be jeopardised for the sake of a few pleasure or profit seeking. I'll read that whole sentence again. The present state of things has become intolerable, so that the solution of the problem must be speedily arrived at. The people of North Uist will no longer allow their lives and property to be jeopardised for the sake of a few pleasure or profit seekers. It is a lamentable fact that many people are prevented from making free use of the roads, which are so necessary a factor to a rural population in the pursuit of a humble livelihood. We therefore earnestly beseech the District Committee to bring this matter before the County Council at an early date. So, very, very unimpressed about the state of roads in the county or in the island. And I found that really interesting. It's signed by numerous members of the community, and you really get strength of feeling there of the fact that this is impacting everyday life for the people who live on the islands. And that is something that is very, very much still a topic of conversation within the Highland Council, and that balance between tourist road use and residents' road use and rural areas and the pressures on infrastructure. So I found that document really interesting. Now, I don't always have a conclusion to the subjects and the matters that are brought before the County Clerk and that sit in the County Clerk's correspondence, because these are correspondence files. So it will be a capture of a moment in time where a document has been given into the County Clerk's collection, either for consideration by the council or something that's being reviewed, something like that. So I don't always know what the decisions were. But if there is a subject of particular interest that you come across, then you could check in the minutes of the County Council to see if the matter was discussed and what was concluded. And it wasn't just roads that were occupying the County Clerk's mind. In the Inverness County Clerk's papers, there is a series of papers relating to the possible expansion and redevelopment of the Caledonian Canal as part of the Royal Commission on Canals and Waterways at the beginning of the 20th century. Amongst these papers is the statement of John Macpherson Grant, Younger of Ballindalloch, Deputy Lieutenant and JP of Inverness, and his statement reads like this: I have been a member of the County Council of the County of Inverness for 15 years, and I am at present convener and chairman of the Finance and Managing Committee of the County Council. I have been deputed on behalf of the County Council, along with the convener, to give evidence regarding the Caledonian Canal, and I desire to press the desirability of enlarging the canal so as to accommodate the shipping of the district and through traffic. The total mileage of the waterway from Corpach to the Bewley Firth is 60 miles, of which there are 22 miles canal proper and 38 miles of natural lochs. The depth sailing of the canal is from 17 to 15 feet, and the lochs have the following dimensions: 170 feet long by 40 feet wide. Loch Oich is the summit of the canal at 105 feet above ordnance datum. The depth of Loch Oich at its shallowest part in extreme summer drought has been as low as 4 feet. Difficulties arise then in navigating the canal from the shortness of the lochs, sharp turns or twists, and restriction of passage through want of sufficient depth by the falling in of debris, loss of time through the slow working of manual power locks, and the impossibility of navigation by night as well as day through want of illumination. I would suggest 2 schemes for the improvement of the canal. The first, of great magnitude, involving the reconstruction of the canal and to enable men of war to pass from the eastern to the western littorals. This, of course, would involve large expenditure, but prove of immense advantage to the district in the circulation of money, the providing of employment, and the consequent stemming of emigration, which is going on rapidly at present. So Ballindalloch then goes on to note that rather than completely reconstructing the entire canal, he says perhaps there are some more modest schemes that might be more achievable, such as, and you'll like this, modest schemes, such as reconstruction of the canal to allow large vessels into the Muirton Basin, raising of the level of Loch Lochy, dredging of Loch Oich, installing electric locks, installing electric lighting, widening the bends, constructing a light railway between Inverness and Dochgarroch, constructing quays at Dochgarroch, and lengthening all the locks. His final sentence, which made me laugh out loud, was, "I cannot speak as to the cost of the above scheme." Well, I'd imagine the cost would be extensive. And petitions and suggestions are frequently found within the County Clerk's papers. Like those 2 we've already looked at, that petition from the ratepayers of North Uist, and that one is a statement by Ballindalloch, a suggestion about how life in the county could be improved. And while these sometimes did come from county residents, they often also come from other organisations or local authorities who might be seeking support to strengthen their case or to learn from each other. So within the County Clerk's papers, you'll find large amounts of correspondence from county residents, but also things that have come in from the Scottish Office or the Department of Education, things like that. For instance, I came across a copy of a 1912 petition of the Corporation of the City of Glasgow, showing their proposed amendments to the Temperance Bill that was then going through Parliament. And that's a great example of the way that the county clerks needed to stay on top of all legislation, current legislation, incoming legislation, and any potential implications that would have for life in his county. So keeping on top of that temperance bill, it's going through Parliament, what's going to happen, what amendments might be made, what implications does that then have for the licensing acts, for running public houses, all of those things. The county clerk's department, as I said at the beginning, had an impact on the life of everyone in the county, adult or child, rich or poor. And we can look at some examples that really illustrate that reach. There are many, many references within the county clerk's papers to prisons and policing. I found lists of prisoners from the 1870s, the dimensions of the cells in Inverness Castle, reports into prison standards and prisoner health, some notes that I really liked from the late 1800s, noting that they were helping prisoners to read, which was nice, as someone who's just literally recording this, having come back from the prison, doing some workshops with the guys in the prison. There are papers also relating to education and schools and children's facilities, such as this. This is the 11th of July, 1908. Dear Sirs, Royal Academy Bursaries. I send you herewith the following applications for bursaries on behalf of pupils of public or state-sided schools in the county. 1. Simon Fraser, Police Sergeant, Kingussie, for his daughter, Lucy Margaret Fraser. 2. Angus McIntyre, Lachen, Inverness, for his daughter, Jessie McIntyre. 3. Thomas Fraser, Mile End, Inverness, for his daughter, Mary Fraser. 4. William Mackenzie, Tomnahurich Bridge, Inverness, for his daughter, Jeanie Mackenzie. 5. Simon Mackenzie, Lachen, Inverness, for his daughter, Philippa Mackenzie. 6. William Ross, Allerburn, Kiltarlity, for Marion Melville. 7. Alexander Stewart, Beaufort, Bewley, for his daughter, Jessie Stewart. The number of bursaries open to pupils from the county is 3, and it is provided by Section 17, Subsection 3 of the Academy Order 1907, that if the number of applicants exceeds the number of bursaries, the nomination of the bursars shall lie with the County Council. I shall therefore be obliged if the County Council will make the nominations and will let me know the nominees as early as possible. And there was a moving letter that I found, really like the one I shared last week in the Invergordon episode, in which someone advocates for that girl who was on that list, Marion Melville of Tomnacross, to be one of those awarded those limited number of bursaries to attend Inverness Royal Academy. The writer, William Cameron of Bunloit, states that the girl Melville is an orphan and a most promising and deserving pupil. He says it would be charity to allow a bursary to her to help her on with her education. He says that she is particularly clever and her teacher has very great hopes of her if only she can get assistance to carry on through with her education. And there's another letter that shows that Tomnacross School was also working to get a small yearly allowance from the Inspector of the Poor that would allow Marion to live in Inverness, because it would have been impossible for her to travel the 13 miles each way across country to attend the IRA. So you find these implications within the county clerk's papers for huge decisions, like does the canal get completely redeveloped at the cost of thousands and thousands and thousands, but also can we argue for Marion Melville to get one of the bursaries because it might change her life as an orphan. So you really get a sense of the scale of and the breadth of things that the county clerk's involved with. And those in poverty or poor health or distress are a regular feature in the county clerk's correspondence and the county clerk's papers, which include reports from the medical officers of health, the sanitary inspectors, and other people who are recording things like the number of infectious diseases in each part of the county. This is an example from 1909. Dear Sir, I herewith enclose my report on the number of cases of infectious diseases notified in this county during the quarter ended 30th of June last. 28 cases were notified as compared with 42 in the corresponding quarter of last year and 49 in the first quarter of the year. No cases were notified from the South Uist and Barra district, and only one each in the 1st, 2nd and North Uist districts. Of the total cases notified, 19 were cases of scarlet fever, 6 of diphtheria, 6 of erysipelas, 3 of enteric fever, 3 of relapsing fever, and 1 of puerperal fever. It will be noticed that in the Harris district, 3 cases of relapsing fever occurred. This fever has not made its appearance in this county for a considerable period, the last case notified being in 1902 in the same district, and I am accordingly calling for a special report on this subject. The health of the county has otherwise been satisfactory. So you get a sense again there of there's an oversight of the health as well as the education and so on. And those whose poverty or time of hardship required care also feature in the records. This is an example from Caithness, and I'm just going to read to you the notes as my colleagues in Caithness wrote them to me. On the 6th of June 1939, a letter was sent from the Department of Health for Scotland to Wick County Clerk in regard to a letter they had received regarding a site for a new institution to replace the present town and county home. Castle Hill House and grounds were suggested as a good site, although they thought it may have been necessary to demolish the old building and build a new one to comply with modern standards. The reason for looking for a new site for the indoor poor is revealed in a special meeting of the Town and County Home Committee on the 22nd of October 1936, where it was discussed that despite having over £2,000 spent on improvements and repairs over the last year, much still needed to be done. Extensive repairs required to the walls, roofs and drainage, etc. In addition to this, the electrics also needed replacing. Mr. Smale of the Department of Health was invited to the meeting to discuss this and whether a government grant would be available, either to do the repairs or to get a new building. Unfortunately, he thought it was unlikely that a grant could be got, but took copies of the plans of a similar building proposed to be erected at Arbroath for the committee to view. It was concluded that a full report be done to find the estimate of the cost of necessary improvements. Another potential site was found at Old Hall, with a letter and a map being sent on the 2nd of June 1937. And the map is still in the record. At a further meeting of the special subcommittee appointed to consider the provision of indoor poor on the 28th of August 1937, of the properties they had been considered buying, they could make an offer for Ulrich House and 40 acres of ground, including garden and house, at entrance for £5,000. The convener, Colonel E.W. Horn, thought it might just be cheaper to build a new property. It was decided to put in an offer for Ulrich House with a time limit of 4 weeks for acceptance and to investigate the cost of a completely new building during that time frame. It was estimated that the full cost of buying Ulrich House and any alterations and repairs that would need to be done, including all the fees for doing the works, would come to around £14,600, and the building, when done, would accommodate 40 inmates. In a letter from the Department of Health for Scotland on the 5th of January 1939, it was advised that the town and county home at Latheron should limit admissions during the winter months to maintain existing standards of comfort and accommodation. And in the end, it seems as though this new institution was never built, as the town and county home continued to be used until 1946, when it was closed and all inmates were moved to Force House. And of course, the other thing that was happening at the beginning of 1939 was that the war was approaching, and so decisions about huge, expensive infrastructure projects were probably not likely to meet with approval. So you can see in that evidence of something being discussed. There's a need in the county to do with health, to do with poverty, but the circumstances mean it doesn't happen. But we've got the evidence of the discussions through the County Clerk's records. We sometimes see in the County Clerk's papers as well evidence of something happening elsewhere in the UK or even further afield that triggers a reaction within the area. So, for instance, there are papers relating to an outbreak of cholera on the continent in the late 1800s, something that would have absolutely spread fear to somewhere like Inverness, which had been absolutely racked by cholera just a few decades earlier. And again, we can identify with that. We can identify with seeing a wave of an illness, of an outbreak of disease coming, and trying to learn as quickly as possible from what's happening in those places before it hits us. So we can see that in the County Clerk's papers. Or we can see this example from Caithness, which will again, I'm sure, be something that many of us will have memories of, not this exact instance because it happened in 1892, but definitely I remember something very similar to this happening and the impact that it had on the area. In 1892, in response to a foot and mouth outbreak in London, the Board of Agriculture implemented an order for preventing further spread of the disease. In the Minute Book of the Local Authorities Contagious Diseases Animals Act, the County of Caithness, it is recorded that a meeting was held in the County Clerk's office in Thurso on the 9th of March 1892, and a circular letter from the Board of Agriculture communicating the foot and mouth disease order was read. So that again is something I was talking about before, that you can see these papers coming from government departments, coming from central organisations that would be sent out to every county clerk, who then would have read, digested, processed that information, the legislation associated with it, and then the county council would have enacted those things. And this particular meeting resolved that the following regulations would apply to Caithness to prevent the introduction of foot and mouth disease. 1. No cattle, sheep, goats or swine shall be moved into the district of the local authority of the county of Caithness from any district or any other local authority in England, Wales or Scotland from and after the 17th day of March 1892, except as expressly authorised by these regulations. 2. Cattle, sheep, goats or swine may be admitted into Caithness from Orkney and Shetland, Sutherland and Ross on production of a certificate from the owner or seller certifying that the animal has not been afflicted with foot and mouth disease or, to the best of his knowledge, been exposed to the infection of foot and mouth disease, also proving that the animal that's being sold has been in the possession of the owner or seller for at least 3 months. Number 3, sheep belonging to the farmers in the county of Caithness presently being wintered in districts of Aberdeenshire or counties north thereof may be moved into the district of Caithness, but only so long as those districts remain free from foot and mouth disease. The meeting resolved to make a representation to Mr. Chaplin, Minister of Agriculture, requesting him to make such regulations in connection with the importation of rags, straw, hay, and hides from foreign countries, which would prevent these articles being brought into this county from counties where the foot and mouth disease exists or is believed to exist. At the following meeting, on the 14th of May 1892, a police report was submitted against Adam Sharp, owner of Clythe Estate, charging him with bringing 14 cattle into the county from Murrayshire without the necessary certificate, said cattle having been brought by train to Helmsdale and then driven by road to Dunbeath and sent to Bruin. In connection with the same matter, a letter dated the 10th was given. A letter dated from the 10th from the Police Sergeant Anderson of Helmsdale to the Chief Constable of Caithness was read. And you can see there that they start to investigate. There's outbreaks of foot and mouth in Leith. There's outbreaks of foot and mouth happening. So what can you put in place to prevent that, to protect county life, the people, the infrastructure, the agriculture and industry? There are so many interesting things within the County Clerk's papers. This is much like the Commissioners of Supply. When I started to put this episode together, I just kept going, that's a really interesting story. That's an interesting story. What could I do with that? And so I'm going to do a whole other episode, because the other things I had started to pull together for this one were the many papers that shed light on the Highlands during another crisis. So we've looked at poverty, we've looked at things like the foot and mouth outbreaks, but there are many papers within the County Clerk series that talk about life during World War One. So many interesting things, in fact, that I'm going to do an entirely separate episode on World War One through the County Clerk's papers, because I want to be able to really do it justice. But I do want to finish with some papers that do deal with a problem which arose during World War One. But I think I can get away with not having it in my full World War One episode. So have a listen to this extract from the County Clerk's papers of Inverness-shire. The County Clerk, the County Council, having been compelled by recent developments to consider the question of steamer communication with Skye and the outer islands, beg to submit the following facts for the consideration of the Secretary for Scotland. So this time it's an outgoing thing. The County Council have met, they have discussed something, and they've decided that they're going to take action, they're going to write to the Secretary of State for Scotland, and this has found its way, of course, into the County Clerk's, onto his desk. They have the following points. 1. Before the outbreak of war, there was a full and regular steamer service, all the most important ports on the west coast having a daily call from either a mail steamer or a cargo boat. This has now been restricted to a mail service limited to 3 days a week to Skye and once a week to the outer islands, with a service of cargo boats at rare and irregular intervals. 2. It has come to the knowledge of the Council that there has been a failure in certain island districts in the potato crop, which is the staple food of the people, and that they are therefore now more than ever dependent on good supplies from the mainland, as well as agricultural requirements and the necessities of life. 3. Quite recently, the freight for all supplies has been doubled, and this renders the getting of food and those other supplies practically prohibitive, and the people are now threatened with a further raising of the freights or a stoppage of the steamer communication altogether. But what I found quite moving particularly was part 4. Sailors and soldiers coming home on furlough are only allowed a few days' leave, and they spend the greater part of their time taken up going to and from the mainland and to their homes in the islands. In these circumstances, the County Council believe it is their duty to strongly press the government to overhaul this system, as they've already done with the railways, overhaul the whole steamer communication between Glasgow, Oban, Mallaig, Lochael, Skye and the Outer Isles to make this more efficient and more regular. And there's another paper in that bundle. There are a lot of papers that relate to this subject of the problems with the mail ships. But another one, particular one that moved me, said it speaks about how damaging this is to the men on the front and those at home, that if they can't communicate and letters don't get back and letters don't travel, how detrimental that is to what's already a horrific experience for those men on the front. But why should their families have to wait so much longer for news and comfort? Which I just found quite thought-provoking. There are letters in the bundle from someone who took up the cause, Sir John Dewar of Highlands and Islands Medical Service fame, MP for Inverness-shire for nearly 20 years. And there are letters there from him pushing the post office to make changes, but he notes in June 1915 that it is now extremely difficult to get any government department to move at present. Of course, because again they're dealing with the First World War and all the associated issues that brought. So I hope that you can see, even from that, just how many things the County Clerk had oversight of or involvement in. And I've only selected a handful of stories from several hundred bundles of documents, each of which contains multiple papers on myriad subjects. And that's not even touching on other record types. I've really looked predominantly at some of the County Council minutes from Caithness, but the correspondence bundles from Inverness, that's not even touching all the other record types in the County Clerk's department. I've already started moving some of the things I was going to talk about today into another one, or another two actually. I've started to put one into women in the workplace, of things that are in the County Clerk's papers, and one on World War I through the County Clerks. So keep an eye out for those being advertised in the future. And I hope you can join me next week. Next week I will be back live for a look at school files. And again, a record series that people don't always look into, preferring to look into the logbooks and the admission registers. But there's a lot of information within school files. So in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm going to leave you with a quote, the closing quote from that film I mentioned at the top of the episode, that NLS film about the County Clerk's work. It finishes showing the clerk looking out of his window, and it says, "His thoughts are his own, but soon the affairs of the county will crowd in upon him once more. Schools for 2, jobs for 5,000, factories and farms, drawings and drains, plans and people. And his time will no longer be his, but yours." So that was beautiful. Thank you very much for joining me. A reminder that this series is brought to you by High Life Highland at no cost to the viewer. High Life Highland is a charity registered in Scotland, and there's no payment or subscription required to take part in this series of events. But if you're able to donate towards our work, then we're really grateful for that. And I will look forward to seeing you next week. Please do leave me some comments and messages, and I will pick them up. Thank you.